Lemon Amiga presents a Playguide video review. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hey there, welcome to another Lemon Amiga Playguide and review. This week's show we'll be taking a look at Chuck Rock, developed and published by Core Design and released to the public in late 1991. The game begins with a very nicely animated instruction sequence where we can see John Major is still parked on that TV, and last time we saw John was in Soccer Kid. And you can see that the graphics at this stage are amazing, and this is just like watching a cartoon, of course, on our Amiga, and I think it's a great way to introduce this game and the comedy and the humour involved with it. Of course, this really does pay homage to the Flintstones, as we see Chuck's wife, the beautiful Ophelia Rock. And one day, Ophelia is attacked by a character known as Gary Gritter, and it's our job to rescue our wife Ophelia from Gary Gritter and his evil hordes of monsters which will attack us in this prehistoric game. Unfortunately, our favourite crime fighting suit is still in the wash, so before we can start fighting those crimes, we'll have to get ourselves some underwear. Title screen we can see that the characters of the Chuck Rock band appear above some great stonking music, and Chuck Rock himself is actually playing the lead guitar, and as far as I know the bass is played by the Lizard character, and the drums of course, and the keyboard is actually played also by the lady who's on the rhythm guitar. So this is great music and it accompanies us as we play this game, so let's press that fire button and check the first level out. In this game we control Chuck Rock as he lands and manoeuvres his way around a set of platforms in this platforming adventure, and you can see using his giant beer belly we can then knock all these deadly life-threatening creatures out of our way and progress through the level. You'll find artistic touches like eggs and animated features on some of these characters, and that's where the comedy of this game really starts to shine through, but unfortunately it doesn't take much damage to knock our character flat onto that floor, and all we can do is carry on and make sure that we pick up those energy hearts to refill our energy up to the top. You can see our energy is represented by the heart on the bottom left hand corner, and it should be possible to collect all these items. You may have noticed a pig with an apple in its mouth. That's a bonus item that we can collect if we manoeuvre rocks into the right position and jump onto those platforms, and the art of picking up rocks and using those at strategic times is part and parcel of the action going on in this game. Also use those rocks and lob those towards those creatures, and that will knock them out and gives us a ranged attack, but usually we'll have to use our fat beer belly to negotiate all these things, and that means getting pretty close to those, and pixel perfect timing reveals that we can get rid of those. But in this section you'll find some boulders colliding on our heads, and the boulders in this game really do sap that energy right down, so you'll have to avoid those at all costs. In Chuck Rock we can either choose the music or the sound effects, and the music will run out midway through the level because that continually loops from level to level, and even though the music is great, that period of silence I could probably do without, and if you want sound effects we'll have to choose those from the menu, and we'll hear some sound effects a little later on. In the meantime, on the Amiga, I'm getting a lift here from a pterodactyl and avoiding the stuff, well, not avoiding actually, the stuff coming from the rear end of a huge monster. We find these great graphics and cartoony atmosphere really flesh out this game and make it worth playing and make it worth a jaunt of our time. You can see it's sometimes hard to negotiate those spikes, but you can get over those, and heading towards the extra health means that we can collect the health and romp through that level as quickly as possible. Yes, if you've memorized these levels, then you can progress really quickly, but you can see the health does not reset level to level, and so you'll have to make sure that you have full health before venturing onto the next one. We are given 4 lives at the beginning of the game. That's the one we are using, plus 3 spares, and so you can only die 4 times before it's game over, and we only have the 1 spare life remaining at the moment. You can see the easy way to get through this boulder field is to simply raise a rock over our heads and to use lateral thinking to get those bouncing overhead. And it's those great touches in this game which gives it that great feel, and these tiny monsters can actually jump up and bite our rear end. So it's those great animations which make up the feel of this game, and the magazine reviewers were certainly appreciative of these great graphics, this smooth scrolling background, and all these colours that we have on screen. And this game reminds me of a console game, and this was ported to virtually every console known to mankind. This was converted, as well as the Amiga, to the Acorn Archimedes computer by a certain Sean Hollingworth. It was also converted to the Atari ST, the Commodore 64, the Game Boy, the Game Gear, the Sega Mega Drive, the Sega Master System, the NES, and also the CD32 came along in 1994. Die, all our health will be restored to the top, but we'll unfortunately have to start from the very beginning of each level. No, there are no waypoints to get to unless you get through to the end of world boss. This game is made up of 4 levels per world, and there are 5 worlds in this game, making 20 levels in total. Approaching the end of level 3 at the moment, and you can see in the background a volcano which does not explode, but you can see some eyes and some technical details filling the screen, and all the player wants to do really is search out those energy hearts and dig out all those boulders and throw those right at the opportune moment before they get hit. I think we can survive maybe 6 hits in this game before we die, and that's better than some of the games that we reviewed already, like Crazy Sue, which only required 1 hit for a complete death, and that's certainly better to the player than having to cope with those 1-hit deaths. But you can see in this scenario I'm having to throw the boulder into that swamp, and one of the boulders is actually protected by another dinosaur. So before that thing sinks, I'm going to have to leg it all the way over there, hitch a ride, duck under all this wildlife, and try to make our way through to the 4th level and towards the end of level boss. Sometimes we have to use those rocks to get ourselves over and around tricky situations, and sometimes we can just throw ourselves towards that landscape and survive. In this case, I can throw the rock into the swamp and jump on that before it sinks, and hopefully that gives us a 1 chance opportunity to get out to that dead end. And it's not really a hit or miss affair, and there are many puzzles to get your head around which slow down the action. But one of the puzzles is certainly lobbing a rock onto a seesaw, which thrusts us up into space, and we'll have to use that boulder on the seesaw on the very right of this bottom level before we can even move a step further, and this nest doesn't really pose too much of a problem, but the puzzles are necessary to progress, and it's not really hard to figure out what you're supposed to be doing because these are really easy to figure out, as long as we remember to stand on top of the seesaw before lobbing that boulder, otherwise it will do nothing. and these puzzles aren't really taxing to the player, which makes this game quite easy, but this is only the first world, so you would expect the game to be easy at this point. It's a pity that we cannot simply climb these vines at this point, and that would be handy, but just like Ruffian that we saw, we'll have to use the branches and the logs to get around this level, and there are no shortcuts available by climbing up any items. And so you can see sometimes that the health is plentiful, and if you know where those health hearts are, you can virtually ignore those, or wait until you really need that health. And if I carry on here to the left, you will find another bonus item, which is another pig symbol we can collect for extra bonus points. You can see the play area is pretty minimal. There is a score on the very top, our lives are on the bottom right, which we have none left, and our energy reading, which means that the player can concentrate all their time and attention on the action going on the screen. And that's another bonus item if we can only get to it, because these items are protected by critters. You'll have to negotiate those. And these traps, well, sometimes you'll have to jump over those and risk the energy, knowing that there is extra energy just further on down that line. And let's try to make our way there before we get killed. It isn't very easy to get there when you have virtually no energy remaining, and in this game sometimes if you fall down the wrong area then you'll die anyway, and there really was no need for that death when we had that energy queued up right away. But that takes us straight back to the title page, where we can select the sound effects.
Unga Bunga.
To add to the humour in the rest of the game, the sound effects are very comical, and I think it's a great shame that we couldn't have a mixture of music and sound effects, perhaps using 2 out of the 4 channels available, but in this game you cannot, and I think the sound effects really add a lot to this game, but it's not something that we can't live without, especially with that great music in the background. And so it's a choice between great sound effects and great music, but as I say, it would have been nice to have a choice of selecting both together. Controls in Chuck Rock are quite tight and quite responsive, and certainly up to that job. The character doesn't leap an amazing distance with a single bound and doesn't really jump up in the air to a great degree, but apart from that you can find that you can land on all of these platforms, and there isn't pixel perfect timing going on to edge your way to the very edge of those and to sneak your way onto the next level by pixel perfect jumps. There are no round robins and no leaps of faith at this point. And if the player does take a high jump off a high platform, they will not lose any energy by the fall, but they will lose energy if you collide with any animals on the way down. And so it's great that we can also press escape and return to the title page if we run out of patience. Like many Amiga games at the time, all we need to do is to enter passwords on the title screen on the keyboard, and that will unlock the cheats for this game. And using the cheats, hopefully we can get off World 1 and check out more of the game. The 2 cheats that I'm activating are the level skip and the fly mode, which also encourages invulnerability. So by pressing a key between 1 and 4, we can select between any of the first 4 levels, and let's just skip through those. And let's get to the 4th level, in which that we died before, and this time rather than going the long way, let's just activate the cheat key, and that activates the flight and the invincibility mode. With the cheat key activated, which I think is the shift button, if you hold down that and use the joystick, then we can go to any place you like on that level, including up in the sky, which is usually at the place where the user never gets to see. So these levels are massive, even though there are only a few platforms on some of those, and you can ride around that level to your heart's content. You can see we weren't very far from the end of that level on our last playthrough, but we weren't really careful enough to make it, and you have to be careful in this game and assault these guys by the book and by the numbers. If you can do that, then you can take these guys out. And here we are on the first level boss. What you have to do is throw a small rock towards that guy as he's attacking, and if you throw that on this ledge, unfortunately it will land on the top ledge, and that's a wasted opportunity, but we can throw the thing from up here and still hit that monster and knock it out. This Triceratops is very easy, and it really does take a lot of combined effort to knock that out, maybe 10 hits or so, and you will have to retreat to the safe spot every single time, otherwise the horn on that thing will jab us in the rear, and that will mean energy lost. Can't manage it, we'll have to try again, and it will reset us back to the start. So let's speed up that footage and try to get all those hits in to save this video becoming quite boring. And yes, I think that this guide really does require one too many hits to knock out to make this game feel really pleasurable, like the sub-levels and the sub-bosses that were found in the game Prehistoric, which perhaps rips this game off somewhat. But I found some of the prehistoric end-of-level bosses were a real joy to get through, whereas in this game they are a real pain. The second world introduces us to the cave system, in which you will find hedgehogs miraculously appear in caves, and snork-like characters which will have a big nose that you have to get rid of, and spiders which are actually the same size as hedgehogs, and bats that look like witches, and all different kinds of things. You can see the roof of the cave is pretty low, and that means you cannot jump over many of these items, and so you'll have to hit your targets first time and get your shots on target in order to progress. Down here is actually a dead end, which just leads to another bonus item, and it means that we can collect many bonus items in this game. The bonus items in level 2 are actually huge tomatoes. You can see a tomato over on the left, and to get us out of that zone we can even hit a snake, and that will extend to give us not a trampoline unfortunately, but that will give us a means to escape. Releasing the cheat key, we can then hop down onto any platform that we desire, and at this point, again, as long as you know where those health hearts are, you can simply march from one to another and never run out of health, and you can simply run through the level collecting those as you go. Just like that, it's not possible to run out of health if you march between one and another, but if you're not familiar with these levels, then sometimes these critters can really demolish that health, especially the ones that have a long range attack. On level 6 we find a monolith, or maybe that's a surfboard that somebody's parked there in that cave, and you can see another graphics change and another colour cycling change. The background is actually in a parallax formation, which actually does move in the background, and you can see that these levels and these caves are very flashed out and great graphics all the way through this game. But the difficulty curve is the one thing which spoils it, and so let's skip on to the next level, and colliding with some of these creatures shouldn't really knock off a massive amount of health unless you collide with a hedgehog perhaps, and bouncing magic mushrooms and things like that really do give this game a variety of enemies, and it's great that we don't have to face the same objects over and over again. And this platform is operated by the guy in the wheel, you can see. So the slapstick humour in this game is never ending, and we do get those comic touches that would have been great in other games. And you can see, using the cheat, we can simply hop over the worst enemies and we can check out this huge level. It is not as huge as the Turrican levels or perhaps the rough and tumble levels that we saw, but it really is a great expanse. It's not too huge that it will take you all night to complete one level, but it's not too short either, and some reviewers criticised this game for having levels which were simply too long. In the meantime, that's the final level of the cave section completed, and in this section we face a saber-toothed tiger, or maybe a baby saber-tooth, and that thing will really rack our energy into the ground. Leave our main character alone, he will actually turn white at the sight of the end of level boss, and that yet again is a great comic visual feature. Let's move on to the third world, and here we find a water world in which we can yet again hold our breath forever, in which we can investigate all these lakes and all these traps and avoid the usual assault of crabs and fish. I think it's great that that background scrolls away there, but unfortunately this super high res mode that we seem to be in at the moment may make the screen a little bit flickery on some machines. Chuck Rock was mainly coded and headed up by 3 guys, but it was jointly coded in this case by Chris Long and Robert Churchill. Chris Long created the covetous game Merv the Merciless in 1989 on the Amiga, which is a very lowly rated game, before being taken on by Core Design. He then moved on to help design The Curse of Enchantica, which appeared in 1992, and then went on to develop the sequel to this game, Chuck Rock 2, Son of Chuck, on the Genesis in 1993. He also helped with Skeleton Crew on the Amiga in 1995. The graphics were drawn by Lee Pullen, and I really do appreciate the graphics in this game. It reminds me of the great levels in Soccer Kid with the beach levels at the end, and as you see me facing a very hard end of third world boss, which I have no idea how to get past. I'll say Lee Pullen also created the graphics for Torvak the Warrior in 1990. He then moved on to Frenetic in 1991, as well as Wonder Boy with Chris Long in 1992, and he then moved on to create the additional graphics in the Tomb Raider game, which appeared in 1996 for Core Design, and additional graphics in Tomb Raider 2, which appeared in 1997. Lee Pullen's last registered game is actually 007 Nightfire, which appeared in 2002. Great music that you can hear over the title sequence and in-game at your choice was created by Matthew Simmons, otherwise known as Format. And we've covered many Format games already, but he also created music for Agony, Macro Machines, Carve Up, Shadow Dancer, and Warzone for Core, which appeared in 1991. Emerging from the water section, we find the next level on the Amiga is a Christmas themed level, and I really do think that they did a great job of these graphics, even though the main character has had a colour swap on his skin. Instead of being brown, he is now a pink colour, and that's a little bit humorous because maybe the guy has got a chill from all this snow. But apart from that, you can see the peas are the bonus item to collect on this particular world, and I really do think that the touches, like the blades of grass and the extra trampoline characters and things like that, really do add to this game. And it's just a pity that most players will never get this far. Just like Joe and Mac Caveman Ninja, a similarly sized prehistoric woolly mammoth has now destroyed our health, and all we can do to try to get through this game is to teleport ourselves on to the 5th and the final world. The graveyard yet again is filled with neat touches like skulls with their tongues hanging out, and it may not be as dark as the Entity graveyard levels that we saw at the end of Entity, but you can see that the humour with the rocks and the club and things scattered around these levels will keep the player interested with all those small details. Moving on to the scores, The Amiga Format magazine gave this game 80%, Amiga Power gave it 86%, Ace gave this 88%, Amiga Action gave it 89, Amiga Computing gave it 90, as well as CU Amiga also gave this 90%, and the One gave it 91. They all praised the great control, the great graphics, the great music, the great sound effects, and the only problem with this game that they could come up with is simply the difficulty curve, as the player tries to get far in this game and tries to memorize these levels and tries to get far enough to be competent with it. On the Amiga, we find ourselves in yet another stomach of an animal, so let's teleport ourselves out of there and fast forward on to the end of game boss. This final boss requires us to run away whenever it snaps its jaws in our direction, and if we run away quickly then we can find a safe spot on that platform. Otherwise, if we are just too close, then we'll get hit by that. And it's yet another one of those bosses which, if you know the formula to get rid of it, is very easy, but if you don't know the formula to get rid of it, then you're going to die. Some players said that Chuck Rock is a very underrated game because later on the levels do open out and the graphics really are amazing, while some players complain that this is an overhyped game and requires too much skill and dedication and is not as fun as the first levels make it out to be. The ending sequence is made out of one static picture and one screen of text, which is a little disappointing for this 2-disc game, but I think that the game itself is a fine example and is well coded, and I'm not quite sure whether it was worth $24.99, but that's the legacy it holds on the Amiga. Thank you for viewing a Lemon Amiga Play Guide and Review. Thank you.